Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. If that's the concept that you believe in, like I said, if you do that and you believe in yourself and you support your partners and whoever you're doing with, then you'll get through it and you'll succeed.
Today on Dirty Linen, we are chatting to someone who's been an important player in the Melbourne restaurant world for, I want to say, 30 years. Simon Denton is owner of Izakaya Den in Russell Street in the city. He also, for a couple of decades, had a really crucial Melbourne restaurant site on the corner of Flinders Lane and Spring Street. He is also part of Denton Wine, and I am thrilled to welcome you, Simon, to the show today.
Thanks, Dani. Nice to be speaking to you.
When people ask you what you do, what do you say?
I guess I say I'm a restaurateur, or I work in restaurants. I tend not to like the, sommelier, restaurateur, those sort of things. I just say I work in restaurants.
And how is it working in restaurants at the moment?
It's pretty challenging. It's been a pretty challenging couple of years. I mean, you said 30 years. It's been been about 36 years now. So it's a pretty long time and a pretty big part of, obviously, it's been my whole life, really. And it certainly hasn't been this challenging in that whole time. I mean, there's been other times when there's been short challenges for short periods, but this is certainly something different.
Let's go back to the beginning and, when you started in restaurants, what was it that drew you in?
Well, I'd started as a teenager as, a job after school sort of thing. And my parents were sort of involved with other restaurateurs. So I got a couple of jobs. And I guess through high school, it was just that. It was earning some extra money and sort of really enjoyed it. And when I came out of high school, I delved into it a little bit deeper. And I guess I got hooked and I found that it was something that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the people, both the people I worked with and customers. I mean, I was pretty shy back then and I guess it helped me, become a different sort of person. And I found that I was actually okay at it as well.
So interesting. And I mean, talk to me about the Japanese influence that's come into so many of your restaurants.
Well, I mean, I have Japanese heritage. So my great-grandmother was Japanese, so I guess that there's something in there that just comes out. I was lucky enough to travel there as a teenager. My parents did work there. We had a Japanese sculptor live with us for 4 or 5 years. He was a very close friend of my parents. So there's always been that strong influence. Obviously love the food, love the culture. So it just developed from there. And then, obviously there was always Japanese people in my life. And one of my partners, Miyuki, I've known for sort of 35 years. And the other partner, Taka, he came and worked for me at Verge, and it sort of just grew from there.
Yeah, so interesting. I think, if I think about that site that was initially Verge and then had so many other different iterations, you had the upstairs space, which was the fine dining for a while, and then the downstairs space, which was various things, including a noodle bar. I mean, I think it's been so interesting watching you as a restaurateur. It feels like as you've rethought your concepts and been so, I guess, free yet also very intentional with the space. It feels like you've been somehow, I don't know, pushing and tracking alongside, leading, and somehow finding the zeitgeist in so many different ways. Can you talk a bit about that, like the idea of a restaurant for a certain time and when, the courage, I suppose, to change it when the concept doesn't feel right to you anymore?
Yeah, well, whether it's courage or necessity, I mean, I think some of those changes were forced upon me and some were driven by me. So I think the important thing, and we do feel like when you open something that there isn't an end in a way with a restaurant. You're only meant to open it once and then you close it and you go and do something else somewhere else. And I think that relates a little bit to the COVID thing at the moment. I've been helping my friends down at Hero and we've opened and closed that 4 or 5 times in 12 months. And you're not really meant to do that in restaurants. But for me, yeah, it's about knowing the time when you do need to change something, I guess, before it becomes stale, or maybe you've lost passion for that particular concept, or you lose someone very integral to that idea and that concept, and you've got to make change. You're forced into change. So it's all those things. And I think even Den at the moment is very different to what it was previously, and that change was forced by COVID. And in the end, it was a really positive thing, because I think you can get stuck just doing the same thing and you're sort of cruising along and you don't make change. You're like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But actually, you do need to change. And restaurants always need reinvigoration.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I mean, I'd love to dig a little bit into Verge, because that was, a really well-respected, well-regarded fine dining restaurant in Melbourne. Can you talk about that one and, why you brought change to that concept?
Yeah, well, I guess I opened Verge just before I turned 30, and it was my first restaurant with my two partners at the time. And I guess it was everything to me at the time. I mean, that's all we focused on. It's all encompassing, and really was that for the 10, 11 years that I was there. I mean, and we went through ups and downs, and there were always challenges with that site and with what we did, and we made changes, and we tried to keep it fresh. And I felt when we went out, we were at a really good point. I think we'd achieved as far as we could in that site with that concept, and it was time for a change before I sort of started not to enjoy it as much. So Verge really taught me a lot. I was learning the whole time, and then I guess it allowed me to blossom after that, after learning all those things.
I mean, some of the food was really highly detailed. It was definitely of its time. Was there something about, did you feel just like you wanted to showcase a different style of cuisine? And I guess the following, was it He Who that followed Verge, or what came next?
Yeah, so we followed it with the two concepts. We did Nama Nama, which was the handmade udon downstairs, so something very casual, which I guess, there was certainly some change in me over that period of time. So, you don't want to do the same thing all the time. I don't want to do the same thing all the time. So, I had these ideas. I wanted something more casual, more day-to-day. And then, He Ho was a more formal sort of bar, and I guess that was influenced by my constant trips to Japan, and the sort of bars that I went to there that I really enjoyed. So, I mean, any concept that I do, anything I open, it's really the first and foremost thing is it's somewhere I want to go. That it's something that I really like, because there's no way that I can convince other people, I think, unless you really want to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting thinking now about, you when you were younger and you just threw everything at it. I mean, obviously, your energy ebbs and flows as challenges come, and, as age sometimes wearies us. But tell us about, where you feel like you're at in your career now, and who you see sort of coming up behind you, and put that in the COVID context.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do get older. Your priorities do shift. I mean, your kids grow up. Your relationships change. All these things are happening around you, and restaurants are very all-encompassing, and they do suck you in and take you out of all those things a lot. So I guess when you get a bit more established, and maybe you have a bit more of a consistency of lifestyle, you gravitate to those things like family and spending more time, I guess, out of the restaurant. And I guess you feel like that's the reward for putting all that hard work in and your experience and all those things. And I guess, COVID has really pulled us all back in, and I'm not talking about just me, but I guess my generation, or the people who I know who own restaurants, who were maybe going through that stage where they were able to step back a little bit. They're back on the floor, lunch and dinner, doing as much as they possibly can to help their restaurant survive. Yeah,
that's so true. It's, I've really, really noticed that. I mean, in a way, it's great to see the people that are behind the businesses when you go into them. So, when you're in a business, I'm sure you see things that, you're glad you've seen, or you notice you're able to make changes that perhaps, would have taken longer, or you might not have seen the necessity for them. But I mean, what does it feel like to be in that position?
I think there's positives, like you just said, like you do see that stuff. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed at my time at Hero in the last 12 months is sort of training some young people. I mean, from a pretty, I don't mean low, like a low base, like not a lot of experience. That was really challenging, but also really enjoyable. And I mean, we are good at, the reason we got there in the first place is we are pretty good at doing those things and being on the floor. I mean, that was our strengths, in the past. So it's a bit like riding a bike. Once you get back in there, you just slot back into it. You maybe don't last as long each shift because the legs aren't quite as young as they used to be. But I think you also have different experience. So you visually see different things. And I think that's one of the positives. One of the hard things is that, you do have to sacrifice those other lifestyle things that maybe you built around you.
And what do you think about this time? Let's say for someone who's, in their early 20s, or, thinking about, oh, well, maybe there are some opportunities out there with rents and, discussions with landlords. Perhaps this is a time to do my own thing. Like, I mean, do you see a lot of opportunity for people who have that energy to throw at things?
Absolutely. And I think these sort of events, I mean, we haven't really had this sort of event, but big change in society, upheaval, those sort of things, they generally lead to a lot of creativity, which is really exciting. So I'm actually excited to see what happens in the next few years. And I think, if you're in your 20s, early 30s, want to open your first business, there is a lot of opportunity there. And at that age, you really have the energy to devote to it and put it in, and which is what you really need at the moment. I mean, even through the COVID period where everyone was having to pivot and change, I mean, the creativity was amazing. And it made me feel really proud to be part of an industry that could do that and could move so swiftly and could survive. I mean, obviously we've lost some, but, most of us have managed to survive. I mean, the government helped, which is amazing. But now we're going into a different stage, and the next, 12 months, it's really uncertain.
Yeah, it still surprises me that it's so uncertain after all this time. We thought we were just, Yeah,
I think it's more uncertain right now.
Yeah, well, tell me how you're feeling about, where we sit right now.
Yeah, like talking to, my friend Michael, who I work with at Hero, we had a long discussion the other day, and it's really like we're in this, rut at the moment with sort of the self-imposed lockdowns, and we look at the future, maybe we'll get another 2 or 3 months that's going to be good, once sort of late February, March, but then what's going to happen in winter? I mean, we don't have the confidence to project more than, a month ahead at the moment. And it's really difficult to know where we're going to go. We oscillate from periods last year where we were so busy with no staff to a period now where we're having to lay staff off and reduce their hours. But we could be back in a position in 3 weeks where we're really busy again and we don't have enough staff. So it's just a constant challenge, and everyone's going through it. We're not special. Everyone's got different challenges.
That just must be, so destabilizing to think that you can't plan more than a couple of weeks out. And indeed, perhaps sometimes a couple of weeks probably seems like, a long time, a really, distant timeline, the way that things change so quickly. But what are the sort of practical implications for a restaurant when you can't look further forward?
Well, I guess the biggest one is staff. I mean, restaurants, bars, hospitality, staff, they're your number one asset. I mean, we can all build a lovely venue. We can, buy nice produce, but without staff front and back, you can't produce the product to that level. So trying to manage that, obviously we want to look after our staff. That's what we do. That's how you maintain good staff, but we can't give them any surety either. I mean, even just writing a roster, whereas you might be able to plan and do it 2 weeks ahead and give people notice and so they can plan their life, you're scrambling to put a roster together on a Monday for the week ahead because you're looking at bookings and you're trying to work out what's actually going to happen. So we've just got to keep rolling with it. And I guess the thing we keep saying to each other and to our staff is we've just got to support each other. We've got to try and understand each of our situations and get through it, and we will get through it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about, the restaurant hero, Karen Martini and Michael Sapuntz's restaurant at Federation Square that you're, helping them out with, as you say. And just think about, Michael is so amazing front of house as well. And just think about those young people that you're bringing through and all the incredible learning that they're able to get from you guys, but then for you also not to be able to, lay out before them this sort of glittering hospitality pathway, it must be really heartbreaking.
It is. And I mean, it was a real challenge. Last year, we sort of, from February through, to train them and get to the point. And before that last major lockdown late last year, we finally reached that point where they were trained to a point where, they were really effective and starting to understand what we were about. And then suddenly we're in lockdown again for 2 or 3 months. And we reopened November, and you sort of got to start again and build them again. And then we're back in this spot again. It is really hard to encourage them and show them a path and how good it can be, and because you're always battling, and you want to do wine training, you want to teach them more, but you're just going through this up and down all the time.
Let's talk about Den. I remember when it opened, how exciting it was for Melbourne, this hidden basement restaurant, a real slice of Japanese culture in Melbourne. And as you say, it's changed. Can you talk about how that restaurant started and how you refashioned it?
Well, yeah, Izakaya Den is basically the place I want to go. And Miyuki and Tucker, my business partners, and we sat around going, why Melbourne's such a great food city? There is a strong Japanese culture here, but really too many of the places were not like you'd find in Japan. They were too conservative. It's like sometimes when people move away from, they think, when they emigrate, people won't understand the real Japan or the real food or real ideas. So I think that was our aim, was to create something that was, something we would find in Tokyo, but also very much a Melbourne place. And that was a real key factor, that, we couldn't pretend we're in Tokyo. We're in Melbourne, but we're trying to channel those things. So, it was really casual, amazingly busy, come and go. And really that's what an izakaya is about. It's about, having fun and having good food and good drinks and with good people. So that's what we drove for a long time. And I guess once COVID hit, we were forced into change for a number of reasons. I mean, the majority of our staff were always Japanese, and that was one of the things that we felt very strongly about. But unfortunately, once COVID hit, they all went back home. They were encouraged to go home if they were a student or on a working holiday. And essentially, we lost all our staff. So once we were able to reopen again, and we were actually closed for 8 months as we went through that COVID period in 2020, and also just trying to plan how we would reopen and what we would do. So essentially, we had to make a complete change to the concept in a lot of ways. So it became more formal, it became a set menu, it became prepaid, and these are all driven by the market. So we knew we couldn't have as many people. So how are we going to reach that revenue that's going to be able to cover our rent and all our outgoings and our staff and everything? So we changed the concept, but I guess what we really wanted to do was keep that spirit of izakaya. So while it is a bit more formal and maybe not quite as crowded, there is still a real spirit of izakaya which underlines everything that we do. Yeah,
it's so interesting. And I mean, how devastating for all your staff to leave like that. You just must have felt bereft and so, I guess, powerless that such an awful period for the way Australia treated our internationals at that time. But then I suppose, on the other hand, that the izakaya food would have been pretty challenging to pivot to takeaway. But yeah, to have those premises closed for 8 months, I mean, how absolutely weird that must have been.
It was pretty, yeah, it was like you walk in there and it's like, yeah, just so empty. And you feel empty when you walk in there because it's a place that's, lives off people being there. And it's in a basement, so you're hidden away. So it needs the energy of people. And yeah, it was hard. It was very hard, but it did give us the time. And I guess, like I said right at the start, sometimes change is forced, and this was forced upon us. And we probably wouldn't have made this sort of change without that being forced on us. And I think, and we renamed it Izakaya Den 2029 because we just went, look, we want to do another 10 years. We're not here just to make up time. So this is a new concept and this is where we're going, and we're going to be around for another 10.
Yeah, I love it. And Jared de Blasi, who was the chef at Izard, which closed, came on to work with this new concept for you. And I mean, obviously we're in another challenging period, but how do you think that new concept is going?
Look, Jared's been amazing, and with his sous chef Paul Martini, the two boys have just been awesome. Jared he was a sous chef for me at Verge, so we have a long history. And we've always stayed pretty close. Jared was probably our number one Izakaya Den customer. He would probably come every week. So, there was, when the time came and Ezard was maybe going, we started to chat about it. And, I guess that's why we were close for 8 months, because I was looking for the next step. And then that sort of opportunity came up, and, we've always loved working together. He has a great relationship with my partners, Tucker and Miyuki, and he loves Japanese food. And he was willing to, he needed some change for himself, but he was also willing to not necessarily do the sort of food he was doing before, take his skills and the detail, but to try and, do something very Japanese, very simple. I kept saying to him, no more than 3, elements on the plate. We've got to keep it simple. And he's really grasped that and really taken it a long way forward, and further forward than I could have imagined. And throughout the, time that we've reopened, the times that we've been able to be reopened, we've really built some momentum each time. And that's one of the other things that's really challenging, is each time you build momentum and then there's this shift again and you've got to start again. So we've been open since December 2020, so 14 months, but we've actually only traded for 7. So it still feels like a really fresh concept to us, and hopefully to other people. So we still feel like there's a lot of places for it to grow, and still a lot of people that haven't experienced it probably should.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I came in early in the reopening, and as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to come back. I think it's so interesting to watch a chef like Jared, who was at Izard. The food was, often very complex. There's a lot of ingredients on some plates, and it's just so interesting to think about that simpler food that he's doing at Den, and to think of that simplicity as the progression, like the next step, like that stripping back, which I think we are seeing so much with chefs as they develop at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do simple. I mean, it's the word is simple, but to do something simply and really effectively with lots of flavour is very difficult. And the reality, Jared and Paul put so much detail behind the scenes into making that one piece of fish or those carrots or those tomatoes taste amazing. So they give the produce every chance without doing too much to it. And keeping it very Japanese, which is always what we've wanted.
Yeah, actually, as you say tomatoes, I remember that tomato dish. Can you tell me about it?
The tomato dish, I'm trying to think now. Oh, just a little baby tomato salad with the yuzu. Yeah, like how simple. I mean, when I go to Japan, you always think about things like tonkatsu and sushi and all these other amazing things. But whenever I leave, I always come back thinking about vegetables. And, the seasonality in Japan, which is such a natural thing. And Jared and Paul and I spend a lot of time talking about these things and the seasonality and trying to be true to it, because I think we're getting better at it here, but it's too easy to be lazy and to get things all year round. Whereas in Japan, you go there, if you're there in summer, you get sanma fish, and you'll see it everywhere. Every single place you go to is sanma, but it's only there for 6 weeks, and then you move on to the next thing. In autumn there's mushrooms, there's matsutake, and again it's 6 weeks, and you can know by the food that's in front of you what season it is, even if you're not outside.
Yeah, it's a real rolling celebration and reverence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that, the tomatoes, that's what that was all about. The tomatoes are amazing at the time, so let's just present them really simply and enjoy them for what they are.
Simon, let's talk a bit about the wine side of your life. Can you tell us about the vineyard and, what part that plays for you?
So a bit more and more as time goes on. And I guess one of the things I've been trying to do is give myself more time to spend there, less time in the restaurants. There's challenges with COVID with that as well. We've had the vineyard 20 years now, and I sort of say we're 20 years young, because you go through, it's a super long-term project, and you make mistakes and you go through stages, and I just feel we've got everything really in place at the moment in terms of the vineyard. We're moving towards organic viticulture, doing a lot of undervine cultivation, no chemicals, through to the branding and all those things. So it's a really exciting time. The idea when I closed Spring Street, I had Denton Wine Bar there, was that we would move it up to the vineyard and open it up there. But COVID sort of put paid to that at the moment. And I guess we're just in a bit of a holding pattern, and just, I guess, really want to see what happens before we make that next step. Because as I said earlier, it's got to be something that I really want to do, that I really like, and am able to put all the energy into.
Yeah. What do you like about making wine?
Oh, look, I mean, I've in restaurants, I've always been involved in wine. I mean, I remember being trained by the wine waiter at the Botanical when I was 18, and that was sort of, I'd already been drinking wine with my dad, and I just took it on from there. So to become a producer is pretty exciting, and I'm amazingly fortunate that my dad being able to set up this vineyard. It is that primary producer feeling, you're producing something from the land. And I guess part of the idea of moving to organics and better cultivation and no chemicals is that it's a family business. I'm going to hand it down to my kids, who hopefully hand it down. So I wanted to be able to hand down something really healthy and really sustainable. And those things are really important to me at the moment.
That's, really beautiful. So Simon, you've said, we're going to get through this. You're going to prevail no matter what. What would you say to people who are feeling really deflated by, the punches that they've had to roll with?
Look, I mean, I've struggled in the last couple of years. I've had some pretty down times, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are struggling mentally with some mental health. And that's, I guess, like I said earlier, within your own environment, your own support group, the people who work with you, reach out, support each other. We will get through it. Or reach out to someone. I chat to all the other owners that I know, and a lot of them are very good friends, and, just talking it out helps. We've got to support each other. I mean, I probably only go to my friends' restaurants at the moment because I really want to just support them, those sort of things. But it will end, and we will get past it, and we'll probably forget very quickly. But when that end is still really uncertain.
And to someone who's taking on their first business or thinking about it, what's something that you could say to them? What's a little mantra or piece of advice or thing you wish you knew?
Look, I think you've just got to believe in what you do. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. If that's the concept that you believe in, like I said, I do mine. It's a place that I want to go to. If you do that and you believe in yourself and you support your partners and whoever you're doing with, then you'll get through it and you'll succeed. There's always going to be challenges, and I guess when those challenges hit you, and I've had plenty in the past, especially when you're building your restaurant, there's always something that goes wrong, something that costs a hell of a lot more than you thought it was. Take a breath, go for a walk, sleep on it. You'll find the next day you can deal with it. You can look at it a bit more clearly and you'll find you'll get past it.
Oh, I love it. So good. Such wise words. Simon, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I think we've covered most things. I just, I guess it's, putting it out there to everyone in the industry that we're all here for each other. So, if someone young, like we've been talking about, starting their own place, you can reach out to me. We can have a chat. I'm always happy to do that.
That is so generous. Really appreciate that. That'll mean a lot to people, even if they never need to get in touch with you, just to know that that you'd be willing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing the stories, the hard-won lessons with us today, Simon. Really important chat and really grateful for your time. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Dani. Lovely talking to you.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.